Hey y'all, this is Cindy. I'm the Tireless Tangler, and you've arrived at day 14 of the 100 Days of Zentangle Project 2020. Thank you all so much for being with me today. If you are beginners, you are in the right place. We are going to tackle Membranart by CZT and friend Tomás Padrós. And this is a fun one. It's all about the layers. So, okay, today I'm going to go ahead and use my Zentangle tile, and you might, if you like this pattern blacked in part, you might want to find something with a large nib. And what I used on my sketch pad was my Blick Studios alcohol marker. It is similar to a Copic marker. It has a fine tip on one end and a broad chisel tip on the other, and that made filling in all of this black over here really fast. My problem with those is I tend to make a mess, so we'll see what happens. So Membranart. Membranart is very much a hollabah type pattern. Hollabah meaning the art of drawing behind. And what we mean by this is hollabah starts with parallel lines. And is drawn in this fashion so that it appears, well, if you get these lined up, it's drawn in this fashion so it appears that these lines are going beneath the original two. So that is a pattern called hollabah. Sorry, for some reason my speller and my brain are not communicating lately. This is hollabah, that's a Zentangle pattern. And of course today we're doing one by Tomás Padrós called Membranart. So Membranart starts very simply, and it truly is a simple pattern, but it does get it does get a little complicated looking. So here's except for the shine on this, I'm not very happy about that. But here's a better look for you. This is a tile that I did on my cereal box. Again, don't ever feel like you don't have drawing material. If you've got cereal in the house, you're good to go. So I have not finished shading this. We're going to talk about shading, and I'm going to use this for an example. But Membranart basically is two splashy patterns set on top of each other. And so the first one is not that hard to figure out. It's getting the second one and figuring that out where you've got the challenge. So let me show you how it's done. Tomás starts on his step out with some big sort of circular bumps. There is no right or wrong here. They can look like whatever you want. Okay, you could also make these longer. So if you wanted to do that, no reason you can't do this. You cannot get this step wrong. It is impossible to get it wrong. So be joyful. Okay, so we are just going to continue in this fashion, making some random sort of little ovally type looking things. All right, that's Membranart right there. That's all you got to do. Now, Tomás likes to cut holes in this and let the background show through. So what we're going to do is right here in the middle, let's see, I think I'm going to put one over here. And for today, I want you to try to go ahead and keep these oval or roundish orb type things. If you go further than that, then the shading gets to be a little problematic, and we don't want that. So I want to be able to show everyone in a similar fashion. So you're going to have something that looks like a piece of cheese, right? It's got a bunch of holes in it. And you can put those wherever you want. Can't get it wrong. And that's it, okay? Now, the tricky thing is to get them to overlap. So underneath here, you're going to want to draw another one, or a couple. You can do whatever you want. I saw an example of Tomás having drawn this with hollabah woven in behind. So there really is nothing you can't do with this at this point. Now, most of the examples you've seen of this are like this, and they have the background blacked. And that is because once you put in a second layer here, you need to be able to differentiate between the three layers, the background, the middle ground, and the high ground, if you will. So how do we go about this? Well, so what I figured I would do is I would start in the middle over here. And if I run across one of these holes, I'm going to draw through it. Just like that. And I'm going to draw another Membranart arch behind this one. Okay? So I'm going to continue to do that. And these can, again, look like anything you want them to look like. You can't get it wrong. All right? Just imagine what you want. And you don't have to pre-plan what the background is going to look like. Just draw these little arches and do them like you would hollabah. Now, because it's fun and interesting, I am going to draw this up here so that it's going to travel through and come out right here. All right. Then, because this is, let me go ahead and finish. Then I'm going to turn my tile again. I think I'll make this one a little bit thicker. Once again, if this line would naturally go in there, then I'm going to let it go through it. Okay. And I think one more, we should have it on the back side. And so here's where I ended up. So I'm going to make this and this sort of match up somehow. And again, you cannot get it wrong. It looks like what it looks like. The fun part of this pattern is how it turns out differently each time you draw it. So I'm going to bring this up and around here like that. All right, so I've got a couple of spaces where I've got stuff rolling through, and we really want that because that's going to enhance the feeling of depth here. All right. And this is as far as I'm going to go with the line art. Now, let's talk about a couple of other things. This background is blacked because, and Tomás has it that way in his step out or in his examples, because a blacked background automatically thrusts what's drawn on top of it to the foreground, right? And what we have here is two things that are higher up in level than the background. And so by making it black, we are sending a clear sign to the visual cortex, the eye, that whatever is drawn on top of that, and typically in a lighter color, that's on top, and the black is in the background. So that's a natural thing that our eye sees, right? Okay, so you can see here, I've done the exact same thing, only I let myself go crazy with the shape on this. But you can see I drew through some of the holes, right? So let's see what we can do with our tile. Now, that said, on this, you can see that one of the other ways that you can deal with the second layer is by drawing straight lines through them. There are lots of different ways. If you just change the texture of each layer, then you're going to be okay. Now, shading with this is a big deal because shading is what makes the magic happen. Until then, you've got a bunch of squiggly lines that don't really mean too much. So let's see what we can do, and I'm going to put one more little round orb in this, and this will be a hole in the back piece. So it's going to go background, midground, foreground. Okay? Now that's as much thinking as I want to do when I do these. And so I am going to speed up the blacking process for you, and I am going to black, but you do not have to. You could also, for example, color to differentiate your layers. Any of those things, or you can use them in conjunction with each other. So any of those things is possible. And I know some of you are not fans of blacking, but sometimes, as in this pattern, I think the blacking makes it so dynamic that I think it's worth trying out. So I'm going to very carefully, because I tend to make a huge mess with these really large marker pens, and Sharpie would work very well. You do not have to have an alcohol marker to do this, but if you do, it's one way to go. You just need a great big black magic marker, really, to do this. You want to carefully keep your lines separate. And you may notice that the black that you get from your marker and the black from your ink pen may show up differently on your tile, so that's something else to take into consideration. And markers, as with all other things, it's always good to turn your pen in your hand every few minutes. It keeps your nib even on all sides, and it allows the ink to flow more smoothly. I think this nib just doesn't like large spaces, and I'm afraid to use the big one on this little tile. Okay, now let me show you. That's why Zentangle tiles are so awesome, because this is something that usually will bleed through. Okay. They truly are all media friendly. Now again, I've mentioned this to some of you before, but the faster you move that marker, the less ink you're actually getting out on your paper. I will also say, a couple of you have mentioned that you are really, you grip your pen really tightly, and you have, I'm going to imagine, a lot of tension in your hand and arm and shoulder and neck. And that is something that I did when I started. It takes practice to stop pushing hard. I have found that most of my pens and nibs are much better if I keep a light hand. And so, you know, one step to that is gently turning your pen in your hand every few seconds so that you get a good ink flow. And the slower I try to lay this down, the more easily it's filling all the little spots. Once again, my light will sort of wash this out a bit, but the hardest part of this pattern is the patience with the blacking, if you're going to black, and you do not have to black, and figuring out which layer you're on and what needs to be blacked and what doesn't. And keeping all of that straight is can be a job. You want to keep these edges as crisp as you can with your inking. That will enhance the 3D quality when we get done. Okay, so here's another area. Again, taking care with your edges. Just remember, don't start blacking until you have all of your layers drawn in. Then you'll be all right. When you go to black an area, do a double check each time. Am I in the right place? Is this something I want to black? Not because this is particularly difficult, but because, again, like so many others, it's easy to lose your place or not pay attention, get turned around, whatever. So a double check of where you are on the tile, which layer you're on, is always a good plan. I think I'm going to use all the ink in this alcohol marker before I'm done. My problem is my Sharpie was already dry. All right, so now these are going to be inked in. And if they get bigger, that's okay. Maybe I can get this to last until the end. This is one that I do not have crisp edges on. I'll have to fix that with my pen, with my micron. You can't sometimes help the fuzzy edges when you use big markers like these with large nibs. Okay, and let's see. I think I'm going to edge these and then try my chisel end on the larger spaces. Okay, so here I need to be sure that I'm blacking the right place, and so I'm blacking the outside layers. So this side. And I want to be careful that I don't change the shape on the bottom so that it will still match what's happening on the top. As you can see, the faster I try to move this pen, the less ink I get out of the end. The slower I move, the more it pours on. All right, so now you can see where I'm going with this, right? This is where we're at. We just want to black all of these spots and drop the background into the background. So let's see if we can speed this up just a little bit without making too big a mess. And we will be done with the background. The real important stuff happens with shading. But this is a good step, and again, if you want to use graphite for this and keep it gray, or you want to put color on it, feel free to do so. Just keep in mind that darker colors tend to fall back, lighter colors tend to push forward. So if you're going to use color on this, you might try putting your darkest color on the background part and then lightening as you go up with the layers. All right, so this is Membranart. Now, how does he achieve these cool 3D looks? I don't know if you can tell. It's shading. So let's look at the shading on this. I tell you guys all the time, I don't teach shading. I'm not, it's too much thinking for me, but in this case, you sort of have to do the shading for it to be effective. And I like my art to be effective, so let me find my pencil. Before you get started with this, I want you to choose a side, okay? Choose a side that you're going to make darker than the other, all right? This is essential in making this pattern 3D, okay? So as a rule in Zentangle art, because it's not about where the light source is and all of that, I tend to choose a side and always shade on that side, because then I'm never confused, so you guys can understand that, right? So the first thing I want to do is go through here and look at all of the spots where I have drawn in the hollow ball fashion behind. And I'm going to start by adding graphite to those places. And I'm going to go ahead and be pretty liberal. You want there to be a distinct difference between the bottom layer and the top layer. Okay, and shading is going to be how we're going to achieve that. Now, I outsmarted myself, but we'll be all right. Okay, so now in these instances where you have both sides, you can shade on both sides if you wish. I guess more correctly, you would pick a side and shade on that, but because this is a jumble of directions, I'm just going to shade as I will. That's always dangerous, right? All right. I am going to try to make it a little narrower on the side, away from my imaginary right side sunshine or light source. I don't like talking about light sources. It's frustrating to me. I'm terrible with shading, realistic shading. I do okay with Zentangle art, but if you're going to ask me, you know, drop shadows and all that, you have lost me. You have lost me entirely. I suppose I'm improving. Thank you, Annie Oken. You're the best. So you're just going to run a little bit of graphite around one edge, or both. Just go with the flow. See what you think is going to work best in your situation. Now, we have managed to get some separation from the back layer, right? Or the secondary layer. However, our first layer still looks really, really flat and sort of lifeless. So I'm going to smudge out these, buff these out, blend them, so that we've got something a little softer going on down here. So we will almost certainly have to come back. They're not quite so all-encompassing, and once again I apologize for not being able to see the shading very well. This light. If any of you are aware of a light that I can use in recording that will still give a nice bright light but will not wash out my my ink and shading. I would love to know what that might be. I do not know anything about photography. I snap my pictures with my iPhone or with my iPad or my Android phone or whatever I've got at the moment, and that's pretty much all I got. Okay, so now I've got my second layer a little buffed out. All right. Now, how do we make these holes look so 3D? I'm going to show you. You remember how you chose a side earlier? Well, choose it again. Okay, so what you're going to do is you're going to pick a side, and on your little holes, or any time that you are dropping down into the other layers, you're going to want to put a little bit of graphite right up around the top of the hole, or the bottom, or the side, or wherever you are putting your graphite, but only on the one side, and just sort of blend it out as you travel around. And now we're going to start seeing some more depth. Okay, so you also want to shade it in the exact same way on the same side, if you can manage it, which I don't always, is to run a little bit of graphite along one edge, just one. And again, this is really not a very good experience. I have got graphite here, you just can't see it because of the light. There's a little bit there. So go ahead and do that, both layers on the same side that you have chosen for your oval shapes. Just put a little graphite on the little tendrils that come out, and when the angle on those turns, just fade out your shading. So I've just got a little bit there on the edge. And I don't want this large and gloppy. I want it to be very subtle. Now this may be too subtle. I think you can see maybe a little bit where I've got that placed. Make that a little darker for you guys. If you want to leave a little sliver of light between the shading and the edge, that is cool. I'm not going to explain that to you. If you have experience with shadows and all of that, then you know why. And I'm not going to explain it to you because I really don't understand it. I just know it's a good thing. So run it along each edge that is similar to where you did your first shadow. You're going to want to treat each of the holes in this way. Just a little bit at the top, and it makes a huge difference. And around here. And if your tortillon, or in this case a paper stump, is too laden with graphite, just take a piece of paper, rub it out on each edge. You can get rid of your graphite. You can also load it in this way with graphite if you don't want any lines or something like that. Probably should have had my tortillon for this work, but now in these places that are underneath where you've already got shading going on, you just kind of have to play that by ear. And if you're going to be in this situation, you want the middle layer to be darker than the shading you put up here. So again, you can't really tell, but I'm adding a much darker shading blend here than is actually above this. See? And you're going to want to do that again here so that you can accentuate the hole in this. But again, you've got that other you've got the other graphite down there from the drop shadow. So again, this is about as much shading as I ever want to do. If it didn't look so cool, Tomás. If it didn't look so cool. But it does. And once again, I am sorry that you really can't tell here, can you? Okay, so now I'm going to continue to do this around each of these holes. I still have to come through here with my pen and clean these edges up just a little bit. And once again, the shading on these is going to make a huge difference. Well, do a better job than that. So kind of fun, huh? Now, you may not like this, you might like it, and quite honestly, right now I'm thinking, how could I embellish this? I'm hopeless, guys. I'm hopeless. So I want to take my pen and move around these edges just a little bit. Make sure my lines are crisp. And flow naturally. This is one of those final step things. A little bit cleaner. This one could definitely use the vacuum. All right, so this doesn't need a lot of embellishing, but if you wanted to, you absolutely could. I am wanting really badly to aura some of this, but I think I'm going to leave this way today. I think I'm going to sneak my chop in over here. But I want you guys to remember on this, just do your loops around the tile as I did. They can look like whatever you want them to look like. It doesn't matter. I think to start, if you have the materials that won't make you crazy to do that, you should go ahead and black your background and then see what you get. Try it in your sketch pad just with the top layer. See if you can draw it. Put some holes in it. And then if you are comfortable with that, then draw in a second layer using the holobath fashion. But again, it does not matter what these look like. You can make them look any way you want. I suggest you go to Tomás's Facebook, no, not Facebook, his Instagram feed, and look at some of his examples. They're always awesome. Or you can search on Instagram hashtag Membranart and find him like that. Once again, you can do things like changing the texture of the middle layer. And so that's one of the things I tried here, and I thought that worked out really well. If you want to put some parallel lines in there and just make that sort of a shadowy thing, that works very well. So this is Membranart by Tomás Padrós, CZT, and this is day 14. I'm going to see you guys tomorrow for day 15 if I have the days right. I will see you then. Thank you for being with me today.